We are going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name's Tiffany. I'm your friendly neighborhood moderator. Today, we are here to talk to you about rethinking course and assessment design in the AI era. We are from Six Red Marbles. We are an educational solutions company that supports course and content development for colleges, universities, and beyond. And today we're going to talk about several things: why AI is changing assessment design, three practical redesign moves, what campuses can do next, and then we're going to have a discussion and Q&A. At this time, I'm going to pass off to our lovely presenters, Jocelyn Wright and Geri Atanassova-Boft, who would love to share more about their wisdom, and I will be here if anyone needs anything. Thank you. Off to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Tiffany. Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Wright. I'm our Director of Community and Market Development, and I'm so excited to be here today talking with you all. Prior to the role that I'm in now, I spent most of my 6 years at Six Red Marbles, managing our learning experience design team and seeing the many different ways that they tackled these types of design challenges with faculty. So really excited to be part of this conversation today. Geri, over to you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Hi, everyone. My name is Geri Atanassova-Boft, and I am a senior learning experience designer at Six Red Marbles. And AI and the use of AI, student use of AI, and how to AI-proof assessments and assignment design in courses are topics for conversations that I have every day with our clients. So I'm also excited to share with you some of our experience and also to hear the questions that you have and the insights that you have from your own experience.
So you may be wondering why this, why now? And if your inbox looked anything like mine, I think I clocked 2 or 3 articles just this morning that were talking about AI and how it's changing assessment design and different strategies that people are using to mitigate the effects of AI. So I think it's a given at this point that AI is really changing the way that students learn, the way that they're approaching academic work. And there's also, a real disconnect in terms of policy often. At least that's what we've seen, is that many institutions don't have a campus-wide AI policy, or if they do, it's not super specific, which I'm generally like all for faculty freedom all the time, but I think this is actually a situation where that becomes kind of problematic, or at least that's what we've seen in our work with faculty, is that when they each have to come up with their own rules in the classroom, it's really difficult to know how, your colleague down the hall is allowing students to use AI or not. And that makes it really difficult to kind of counsel students, especially in some of the big introductory courses that students take early on in their programs, like a research or a data methods course or something. You want to make sure that you're giving advice that ideally will be practical, past just your course. But I guess the good news here is, when it comes to assessment, the real question hasn't changed that much. Assessment is about assessing, determining whether students are learning and collecting meaningful evidence of learning. And I think that's a question that I'm really looking forward to digging into with you all, is what actually is meaningful evidence of learning right now? And I saw someone put in the chat about oral exams to combat AI. We've been seeing, that's one of many strategies people are using. And actually, I was just about to say I was reading some interesting studies on oral exams for large scale classes. And it seems like the trick is to leverage TAs if you have them, but then it's also how do you ensure that consistency of experience? And then there's all kinds of stuff too with oral exams that both at the gender level, at the, whether they're first generation college, all of that can really affect how intimidated students are by oral exams. So yeah, that's one of the things that we will be talking about. So I was talking about AI policies just a minute ago, and I'd like to return to that briefly because I think it's really important for the rest of our conversation. So what I would like to know is, does your institution have policies around AI and assessment? And then also, do you have a policy around AI and assessment? And if you have any thoughts about how those two work together or don't, I would love to hear those too. Yeah, I heard about that AI agent too, to conduct oral exams for their big class. And that's where I think it gets really interesting is, everybody is experimenting with AI, and sometimes there's experimentation with AI to minimize student AI usage. So it's a bit of a Wild West right now. All right. So our first question there, does your institution have policies around AI and assessment? It looks like the no's are beating out the yeses, but it looks like we're pretty split there. Um, should we move on to the next question?
And this second question is about you personally.
See, this is what we thought might happen. I see that I shouldn't count the chickens before they hatch, but it does seem to be trending that many of you do have a policy for AI and assessment. It seems like maybe more of you have a policy for AI and assessment than your respective institutions do. And I see a question here. I think this is an important one, so I'll stop and answer it. I'm not sure how I understand how we're using the term assessment, and we're using assessment to basically refer to anything that is measuring student learning, student mastery of the learning objectives. So anything from a quick knowledge check quiz after doing the reading to a 30-page research paper to a presentation to everything in between. All right. So the shift that we're kind of talking about today, and this is something that I was talking to Tiffany about when we were thinking about, what we wanted to talk about for this conversation is, you know, I think the conversation is shifting largely away from our students using AI because we have countless polls. I think the most recent one I saw from Gallup like a week ago was that over 50, maybe closer to 60% of students are using AI at least on a weekly basis, and something like a quarter are using it on a daily basis. Um, and that the question is now kind of shifting towards people sharing their thoughts around, you know, how they can construct an assignment that will give valid evidence of student thinking. And that doesn't mean that AI has to be allowed for absolutely everything. But I think this shift, even without a huge attention to the actual AI policy, will make kind of the biggest, most impactful difference in how effective assessments are and resultingly how quote unquote AI proof they are. Um, so if we move on to the next slide. Um, If you think about what needs to be assessed still, it's really evidence of student learning. Evidence of student learning, evidence to answer the question in the chat here that they are both thinking their way through to some kind of learning at the end. So I think it's both the thinking and the learning. And Geri is going to share some great strategies for really demonstrating that student thinking en route to student learning. But as we redesign assessments, we don't recommend being overly reactive to AI either. So just because, and I know people are doing this anyway, because in some cases, what are you going to do? But just because ChatGPT or Claude can write, a 30-page research paper with the push of a button, doesn't necessarily mean you should never assign a 30-page research paper. It should instead thinking about the learning goals, the objective behind that research paper, and taking that into consideration. What are the best ways to measure mastery of the learning objectives? So the way that we measure achievement may change, some of the tools that we use may change, but we should still be measuring the mastery of the learning objectives and not just cutting things out because of AI, and also not just inviting AI into the conversation because everybody is talking about it, right? You want to make sure that it's relevant to the task or tasks at hand. So, a different way to think about it is, what are the tasks that AI excels at versus tasks that require human judgment? Um, before we get into Geri's many wonderful strategies for assessment, I do have yet another question for this group. And it is, have you tried to AI proof your assessments? I suspect many people in this room have. And what have you tried? So I know I saw some chatter early on about oral exams. Um, I'm seeing several people have not yet changed their assessments. If you do pick something else and you feel like you can share in the Q&A, that would be fantastic, because the something else's are always interesting. I see reflections explaining thought process are quite popular, as is requiring demonstration of AI use. Blue Book assignments are coming back. And Tiffany is pointing out that this is a single response poll. So I had to hazard a guess. Probably many of you are doing more than one of these things. So I actually don't know how valid our data is here, but it gives us at least some smattering of different things that people are trying. And let's see, unless something else is increase in practicum exams for skills development demonstration, graded small or large group discussions that are not necessarily oral exams. That's a great stepping stone to oral exams. Oral defense with AI to help scale the process, because yes, doing an oral defense with hundreds of students is a nightmare for anyone. Um, and let's see. And yeah, I see here. I think AI proofing can be a challenging, limiting lens to view this question through, given the unreliability of AI detection and the accessibility, equitable implications of some technology opt-out measures. And yes, I think it is worth pointing out that AI detection is not particularly good. And as someone who, I swear I used M dashes before AI thought it was cool, I am often thinking about, am I saying things that sound like they're AI generated, even though they're not? And there's been some evidence that a lot of students are also kind of changing their writing, introducing small human errors and things like that, which of course is also changing the way that they're approaching their learning. Let's see. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to all of these wonderful ideas, but I do encourage you to check out the chat for the ones that I missed. But yes, I like this one. Ask questions related to something, course content that's not out on the web. That's something Geri's going to talk about. Case study assignments. Um, Assessing the actual AI product, discussing its strengths and weaknesses, changing assignments so AI usage would not be as helpful, scaffolding assignment. So you have a lot of great ideas here. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Geri, and she's going to dive into some of the top recommendations that we have for thinking about how you should consider changing or rethinking assessment in response to the prevalence of AI.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I want to talk about designing assessments in this new AI era, not as challenge to AI-proof assessments, but really to design them with AI in mind. Because the goal, a more achievable goal, than trying to keep AI entirely out of student output, would be to keep the learning goals in mind and make sure that whatever assessment we design, whether the student uses AI or not, will still give us enough insight into the student learning. Um, at this time, what we know about AI is that it can accelerate recall, summary, pattern-based drafting, and formulaic responses. These are things that AI does beautifully, easily, very well. But there are things that AI still doesn't do very well, and that really show student learning, which are interpretation, justification. I saw this in a lot of your chat responses as well. Application evaluation, creating something new, explaining decisions. Now, this list on the right is not a list that is entirely AI proof because AI changes and develops very quickly. But it is something to keep in mind when we design assessments. This is a more process-based approach to design rather than just a product-based approach to design. And this is really what we want to focus on in our design. Those of you who may have taught or are teaching foreign languages may recognize this as the Google Translate issue that we all had as language teachers 10 years ago when it came out, and all of a sudden, all of us were flooded with Google Translate inputs in all of the homeworks. It didn't force us to stop giving homework. It just forced us to rethink what types of homework we give and how we conduct our assessments and our language practice. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, in this presentation, our goal is not to pretend that we can offer you absolute solutions. Like, we're not going to give you a list of perfectly AI-proof assignments or a universal template that will work for everyone in every discipline. But what we are hoping to be able to offer you is some practical design thinking, some design moves that you can use to generate stronger evidence of learning in this new environment. Thank you. Now, the first move out of three is design for visible thinking and not just polished output. Again, if we focus on just the output, this is something that AI excels at. But if we involve in the assessment an evaluation of the process itself, that gives us a lot more information about the student learning and thinking. And that can involve process logs, annotated drafts, reflection memos, proposal stages as the students are developing proposals throughout the assignment process. Oral or recorded explanation of what they did and why they did it, and post-assessment reflection. What can that look like? Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. For example, this is showing your work assessment sequence. The students can start with submitting a short proposal for the assignment, which is something that many faculty already do in their courses. They start with a proposal, with a plan, with an approach. There is a feedback stage. There is a feedback element at this stage, and then they continue to develop the actual assignment. Complete the analysis that would typically be in the past the goal of this assessment, but in the end of this assessment, we also want to include another step, which is submit a recording or reflection. It can be written, it can be recorded, explaining key decisions, methods, and reasoning. Because again, involving in the assessment itself, the stages of thinking about the proposal, justifying the approach to completing the assessment, and then reflecting on the assessment can shift the evaluation from the final answer, the final project, to the actual process. Thank you. The second move, assess application, judgment, and transfer, and not just generic response patterns. What AI is great at is producing generic responses, because this is what it's trained on, and this is the type of data that it has. The more we ask students to engage with a specific context, particular data, particular context for application, and to offer their interpretive judgment, the harder it is for them to just produce AI output and offer that as the product for the assessment. What that means is asking the students to apply ideas to a specific context, to interpret unique data or evidence. I will give you an example of this in just a second. To justify their choices, to compare alternatives, to explain limitations of either the data or of their choices, to connect the learning to an actual real setting. If it is something that is happening right now, that is always the best situation. Next slide, please. So this is an example of an assessment that we actually worked on with a client. This was a public health program, and this was a public health course on epidemiology. And the original prompt in the assessment was describe an outbreak investigation process. And this is a recall-based prompt. So this is something that AI can do really beautifully. But what we tried to do was take this initial prompt and contextualize it as much as possible, give it the scenario, give it a very narrow context, very narrow set of data that the students can use, as specific as possible, and then evaluate how they deal with this within this context. So our resulting prompt was, you're the epidemiologist for Riverbend County, which was the local county. Review the case data, identify a likely exposure source, explain the limitation of the data set, and justify why you ruled out alternatives. So this is very, very specific. And it is less likely for AI to for the work to complete this assignment to be successfully outsourced, not just to AI, but really to anyone else who is not familiar with the data and who is not familiar with the process. So specific context, specific interpretation, and justification, these are very hard to outsource. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next move and last is probably obvious to many of you. The answer may be clearer expectations. In a lot of cases, what is useful is not trying to ban AI outright. It is not realistic to expect that to really happen, or to pretend that it's not there. It is there. Students will use it. So it's much better to regulate as much as possible its use, to have very clear expectations, very clear criteria when AI can be used in what situations for what purposes, and to have students document their use of AI with proof, obviously. Require students to disclose how they use it, what they have changed based on the output, on the original output that they got from AI. Ask them to critique AI output. AI can help students organize their ideas. AI helps us organize our ideas in many cases for lectures, presentations, etc. So this is a tool that students will be using, but in what way? If we require from them to disclose their AI use, if we provide very clear guidance on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in terms of AI use, if we allow the output, but then ask them to treat that output critically, make improvements, change that output in a way that will match the assignment closer, and then document those changes. Build in our rubrics language that focuses on the process and the decision making rather than the actual product. These can be helpful steps to take and helpful ways to think about designing assessments that will still meet our goals. Next slide, please. So here's an example of this third move in action, critical engagement with AI. Um, the sample prompt is, I asked an AI tool to draft a plan for this investigation. What are three errors, omissions, or weak assumptions in its reasoning? And what that prompt does is flip the dynamic, because instead of using AI as a shortcut, the students have to evaluate what AI has produced. So, and in order to evaluate it well, they need judgment skills. They need what we care about. They need the domain knowledge. They need the critical reading. They need knowing what good looks like and what weak looks like and why, and to be able to explain that. So the AI output becomes sort of a teaching artifact in this case instead of a temptation. And it also can be a source of productive conversations in class on AI use and on its limitations. So in this case, students evaluate, not just accept the output. And this critical analysis of AI work requires judgment skills that will matter the most. Next slide, please. So to summarize all of these three moves into 4 practical strategies: make thinking visible using process logs, annotated drafts, reflection memos, post-assessment prompts, distribute the learning evidence, sorry, low stakes checkpoints, plus larger assignments, the synthesize, and then timed submission windows can be helpful as well. So the work happens in manageable pieces. Go multi-model. What that means is use oral exams in addition to written exams. Use live demos in addition to recorded demos. Use lab walkthroughs, portfolios, recorded reflections, written reflections. Sometimes the most AI-resistant move is simply ask the student to talk through their work and explain it to you in whatever format is most convenient in your context. And then finally, be transparent. Document AI use. And one very helpful strategy can be have faculty document their AI use in their course development as well, and use that as an example for the students of how we engage with AI in the right way. Create prompt libraries for the class. One of the faculty with whom I worked on a public health course actually created a series of prompts that students could use themselves to generate additional practice examples or additional practice assessments for themselves. And then he asked them to, once AI had generated those outputs, he asked them to critique them. Not just to complete them, but also to critique them and to see whether they were on par with the other assessments in the course that were provided by the faculty, or if they were easier, harder, less meaningful, less concrete. And finally, rubrics designed for AI-enabled tasks, because it's not helpful to pretend that it doesn't exist. So let's document how it can be actually used in the courses. None of these is really a silver bullet. None of these is 100% strategy that will work in every single context. But used together and thoughtfully, they can be the basis of a new design approach in our assessments, because they're focusing on generating better evidence of student thinking rather than focusing on the product, which is what a lot of our traditional assessments have been doing. Back to Jocelyn now to talk about what this means at the campus level.
Really quickly, we just had an interesting question in the chat. It was, how would you grade the student if you ask them questions about their assignment? So I think it goes back to, so if you're asking students questions about how they completed the assignment, how would you
Oh,
assess that?
well, that would really, how we would grade the students would really depend on on our goal with the assignment, really. What are we trying to learn from what we are asking them to do? So in this case, the actual from a practical perspective, how would that be graded? It can be graded with a rubric. It can be simply used as just be graded with a check plus or minus. They either did it or didn't do it. But really, what is important in them submitting this sort of additional proof of thinking is that you get to see it. You get to understand how the students are engaging with the assignment, with the assessment and with the material. So I would really focus a little bit less on how exactly we are grading it and more on how we are using it. Um, because use can be broader than just um, a summary grade that we assign for an assignment. And I understand that in practical terms, that may not be applicable in many cases where you have many students and you're not able to give everyone the individual attention that such deep thinking assignments may need. But this is why we're having these conversations, because we want to see what the challenges are and we want to see where some of the strategies are not working and why. And that will help us develop better strategies.
All right. Well, I think some of you are already doing this, sharing questions and ideas in the chat. So that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of our time together. So we'll be going through what we see, and if you feel like we've skipped over, just put it in the chat again, and we'll do our best to get to as many of these as we can. Um, and one of the strategies that I see here from Matthew is some of my courses, my students will often write a procedure for troubleshooting and running diagnostics. One thing I have them focus on is to write the procedure first and then compare a procedure written by AI to see how similar the approach is to apply the solution. And I really like this approach. You know, I was looking at the comments as Geri was talking, and like the honest reality is if a student wants to use AI, they're going to use AI. And I think it's kind of impossible to keep them from using AI, quite frankly. But I think what we can do is discourage it in a variety of different ways or instruct on, situations where it's applicable. And I think to me, one of the most powerful strategies that I've seen is, kind of similar to what Matthew was suggesting, but, in the humanities, just helping students understand what the benefits and limitations are of AI generated prose. Because kind of once you see some of those tells, and of course it's all evolving and changing, and you can prompt your AI to remove AI tells from the thing that you prompted it to write. Like if you want to put in the work, you can use AI for pretty much anything. But I think helping students understand the implications of outsourcing that thinking, what they're gaining, what they're losing, I think is probably one of the most valuable gifts that we can give them in the classroom. See, I'm seeing other questions here around equity and AI access, differences between paid, unpaid subscriptions, whether the AI is embedded in the LMS, which I think all the major LMSs now at least offer as an option, of course, for an upcharge.
Yeah.
And yeah, Geri, do you have any thoughts on how to kind of counter that inequity in AI usage for students?
I don't really I was thinking about something else that was prompted by another question that was asked, which was how do we, which was focused on um, we are teaching the students how to use AI appropriately. We are trying ex to show to them what the value of um, developing their own thinking is. This is not necessarily seed from which we will see something grow immediately. This is a seed that will be planted and will probably and can probably flourish down the road, but that may happen years after the students have left our courses. And this is something that I really struggled with when I was when I was an instructor. Um, because you don't see necessarily the immediate response, the immediate result from your efforts. But I have seen delayed results from my efforts. So I feel that we need to be a little bit more optimistic about what planting seeds actually means, about how they actually develop in the real world, about what the results for the students really are, because we tend to measure them in very short terms. We tend to measure them with the semester end. And for us, what the student shows at the end of that semester is what they have learned. This is the result of our work. This is the result of their work, which for probably most faculty who have had the benefit of seeing students come back for later courses or seeing them years after they left your classrooms, is probably something that they recognize as an incomplete data set, because this is not all that happens with the information that we give them and the skills that we try to develop. So completely unrelated to your question, Jocelyn. Sorry.
No, but I think maybe a way to connect the two might be, in the process of planting seeds, I mean, could we could we almost say that even if it might seem to be a disadvantage in this precise moment, I do sometimes wonder if people who have less access to AI right now are going to have a more thorough ability to think critically because they can't fall back on the crutch in the same way. I mean, we're not going to know until we see, but I do wonder that. There's so many wonderful thoughts and ideas here. I liked this one from Austin about the coding class. That if they teach anything that if they put anything in their homework rather that hasn't been taught in class, they get a 0. But they have the opportunity to come in and explain their code and the choices they made, so that if they really did teach themselves how to do it, and that really was a evidence of, that really was their thought process. And I think that I like that you're mitigating the, oh, well, this wasn't taught in class, so you must have used AI. Of course, some students very well may be doing that, and this catches those, but it also, doesn't shut down students who might want to be reading ahead or experimenting or, trying something new. I guess my only concern would be how to scale that at a certain point, which I see as a recurring question in here. There's a difference between, doing some of these strategies in a small, 10, 20 person class. It's very different in a lecture hall of, hundreds of students.
Yeah.
I believe we have time for one more question or response to one of these thoughtful messages. I hope everyone has been reading along in the chat. There's some really great stuff in here. I'm trying to see. I think I saw something a little bit earlier that I thought you two might want to touch on. Uh, so yes, from Cynthia, it says an assignment I've used in lieu of a final exam for literary survey class, group creation and performance of a short play with authors, characters, and text from the syllabus serving as the basis for the script, then reflection on their contribution and takeaways. I think adding creativity to anything is something that AI just has not gotten very good at yet. And just wanted to see if you had any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think I love that idea. And I think I mean, it's a whole separate conversation how much learning should be play and, games and fun versus, just memorization and learning the thing or, kind of applying things. But I do think that this is the type of thing that I imagine for students would be fun for them to do on their own. And that, I could see being a very effective deterrent against AI use as well. Is that would be the type of thing that really invites creativity and hopefully for those students, they would be really thinking about, what ideas of their own that sparks. And I think that that would be very, very powerful.
I want to say that I really appreciate everyone joining us today and especially joining in the conversation. We do have some contact info up on the screen if you are interested. You will receive a couple things as follow-up. I'll see if Jocelyn and Geri have any final notes, but I want to share that we do have a companion guide that goes along with this webinar that I will be sending out to all of you. And you'll also, I believe, receive the recording afterwards, and we will also have it posted on our website soon. So I'll pass it back to Jocelyn and Geri for any final thoughts, and please keep it coming in the chat.
My only thought is I hope that we're able to find a forum to keep this conversation going because I think we have some really rich ideas here. And I do think, and I've seen this in, several AI working groups at different colleges and universities that kind of both knowing you're not alone in dealing with this, and then also being able to bounce ideas off of people. And I think honestly, in some ways, it can be particularly invigorating when it's someone who's a completely different discipline from the one that you're in. Sometimes that can spark ideas. So I hope that we're able to find a forum to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually find this conversation really, really exciting and everything that is happening right now really exciting because I feel that every time we are forced to rethink the way we teach and the way we assess students and the way we organize learning in general, this is always for the best. This always brings something new and different and better than it used to be. So I am really, really excited for what is to come and for further conversations about this.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.